Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My family doesn't eat turkey for Thanksgiving. We eat something much worse. It's tofu. My family eats tofu, guys. Did you think I meant people or something? Goodness, you all have sick minds. I'm really not here to ruin Thanksgiving for you. My family takes it very seriously. I love Thanksgiving. Being a teenage guy, it might be the one holiday a year I actually get to eat as much as I want, plus it's a family holiday. When you have a family as big as mine, every gathering is a frat party. People are coming in and out every second. Raucous laughter comes from every room. And by the end, something is bound to break. My dad had 9 siblings. All of them had at least 3 kids. Growing up, my best friends were my cousins, and I had at least one uncle as a teacher each year of high school. Whenever we all meet up, we do it at my grandma's house, which may literally be the only house in town big enough to hold us all. This Thanksgiving, it was my Uncle Steve to greet me at the door. Cooper, he slapped me on the shoulder, then patted his belly. Ready to eat? I've been training all year. It's a bit of a joke in my family. Almost everybody on my dad's side is on the bigger side. Most of the year, we blame it on genetics. But the closer we get to Thanksgiving, the more we blame it on that. We're not overeating. We're training. I roll my eyes at Steve, grin, then carry my family's pumpkin pie to the large dining room table with the rest of food. I placed it next to the tofu turkey, 3 tins of gravy, and 5 plates of baked yams. Like I said, we take Thanksgiving seriously. Fridge. My grandma instructed me from across the room. That's where desserts are going. For after, a few meandered over for conversation. They caught me up on their first year of college, or the latest from their cross-country training. A few of them were dating new people, but none of their partners came. Our family prefers to keep holidays within the family. My cousin Melinda dabbed a finger in the cranberry sauce. I swatted at her. No cheating. Hey, she said. Not all of us are unquenchable voids, just trying to get a head start. As we chatted, the knocking at the door continued. Family after family filed in until finally, the knocking stopped completely. That's all of us. Uncle Steve announced and counted all of us wordlessly. He checked his watch. Might as well get started then. It's getting late. We gathered around 2 elongated dining room tables. We said grace. Dig in, my grandma announced. We did. She didn't though. Just watched us with a distant smile on her face. Sometimes we joke that grandma isn't actually part of the family, since she only got the family last name through marriage, not blood. Sometimes I think my family jokes too much. The tofu went first. It was the blandest on the table. No salt or spices or anything. The potatoes went next. No butter. They were easy to slide down in between copious gulps of water. Not fair. My Aunt Hestia hissed as one of my cousins snatched the last spoonful of the potatoes with their bare hands. Our previous chatter had stopped completely. None of us were smiling now. We only ate, and ate, and ate. Green beans, yams, salad, stuffing, chicken. One of my youngest cousins grabbed a gravy boat and started chugging the whole thing. My uncle snarled and tried to wrestle it away. I was already through my second helpings of everything, way more than most others. I took a moment to laugh at the sight that crouton lodged itself in my throat. My eyes went wide. I couldn't breathe. I struggled at my neck. I was suffocating. I pounded my chest. The piece of salad flew out. It wasn't the only thing. A funnel of brown, white, pink sludge fountained from my throat. I managed to turn my head, and the majority of it went slushing onto the newly shampooed carpet. For one, Terrible moment. Everyone stopped eating. Mouths hung open with stuffing half chewed. Eyes went wide and pitying. They resumed their feast with renewed vigor. I wiped my mouth and fought back nausea. I reached for cranberry sauce, but Melinda snatched it away. "Please," I said, "let me catch back up." She said nothing, but her eyes apologized as she guzzled a bowl of red, sticky sludge. I reached for another tray, but that was snatched up too. A third, my Uncle Steve, took it this time. All the food was nearly gone. There was still time. I was a teenage guy. I could fight through the queasiness. I didn't have to lose. Not necessarily. Something knocked at the door. Nobody looked. Why bother? We already knew the whole family was here. The fighting for the final scraps grew more and more violent. Kicking, screeching, clawing. Again a knock. This time my grandma twisted in her lifted seat. "They're early," she said and stood. No, there was practically nothing left. Melinda licked the last dry crust of potatoes from the rim of the pan. My grandma walked to the door. The knocking grew more rapid. I cast my eyes around wildly. My vomit splattered the rug and tiling. For one disgusting moment, I imagined scooping into my open hands and tipping it into my mouth. There was no other option, except I sprinted for the kitchen, more specifically the fridge. Cheating! My Aunt Hestia screamed and scrambled up after me. I threw open the fridge just as the front door banged open. A cold gust swept through the house, but the only sensation on my skin was a coolness from the open box in front of me. There it was. I yanked off the glossy saran wrap and seized tremendous handfuls of pumpkin pie, straight from the platter. In the other room, my extended family went quiet. Aunt Hestia, who'd sprung up after me, suddenly slowed, hovering in the entryway between the two rooms. Her eyes opened wide, filling with familiar, terrible horror. She was in its sight. I, however, wasn't. Not yet. I shoved pie into my mouth by the handful. I barely paused to chew, and I didn't need to. That was the beauty of pumpkin puree. It came pre-chewed, pre-mashed, ready to slide willingly down the fleshy tunnel that was my throat. My back arched, and I gagged. 3 times I gagged, but each time I swallowed the nausea away with more pie. There was still a bit of food in my stomach from before the sick. That had to count for something. My stomach was already bursting again. My vision went lopsided and dizzy. I doubted I'd ever eat pumpkin again, but for now I had to keep going, had to keep eating, I froze. The guests, the one Grandma had let in, had finished inspecting the rest of my family, pausing by each of them. Already it was visible in the corner of my vision, but I didn't dare turn my head to look at it. Instead, I stayed still like my aunt. Perfectly still, it inspected her. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling, but it bent low to look over her face, stare in each eye, pat her stomach. Then it was my turn. I didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The being towered over me, long-limbed, perfectly white, the whiteness of vanilla ice cream. It pressed 6 long fingers against my stomach and pushed in, testing. Its head lowered just beside my ear, and the thing let out a soft moan of pain, of hunger. It straightened. The white creature stepped away. I allowed myself a slow, careful inhale of air as the thing loped back toward the others and paused at my Aunt Hestia. It bent low and sniffed her one more time. Then it devoured her. Her shrieks were violent things, sharp, terrified, piercing. There was squelching, ripping, tearing, the snap of something breaking, the gulp of things being guzzled down. All of it was finished within the minute, ending with her bones clattering to the tiled kitchen floor. They were perfectly white, the white of vanilla ice cream. The creature let out a single sigh of relief, then left the way to come, back to the front door. My grandma shut it behind it. I gulped. I wiped at my mouth. I rejoined the rest of my family in the dining room. For a long while, none of us spoke. We sat there in our chairs, and my case of vomit splattered one, as staring at the array of empty dishes and plates licked clean. One of the serving bowls was cracked from the commotion. Nearly every glass had toppled on its side, and cranberry juice stained the tablecloth a blood red. One of the younger cousins sniffed. Grandma made her way back to the head of the table. She took her seat and smiled a faint, satisfied smile. "Now," she said, Who's ready for dessert? Story 2. Santa's stuck in the chimney. My sister and I woke up before the sun on Christmas morning. I had to push her to make her stop snoring. We shared one bed, our feet cold on the floor when we climbed out. I held onto her hand. It was cold and wet and sticky. We ran into the living room. I want a Barbie, and I'm a Barbie house, but a big house. Oh, and I want actually 2 Barbies, so our Barbies can play with each other, my sister whispered. She was only a year younger than me, and we were both in the first grade at the same time. When we looked in the living room, it was too dark to see anything. I tried to turn a light on, but I couldn't reach good. I jumped real high and hit it. Smack! We didn't have a tree. Well, not a real one anyway. It was almost a tree. Mama made it all by herself using taped up paper towel rolls and green tissue paper she saved for my birthday present. Mama said it was because trees belonged in the nature, that it wouldn't be nice to take them away from their families. I thought she was very nice for that. We looked at the tree super excited. Except there was nothing under it. I smacked my head with my hand like I saw Mama do some time. Santa must have hidden the presents real good. We checked for gifts hiding away in the corners of the house. Opened up the closet, looked inside the dark, dusty fireplace, and checked under the smelly couch cushions. They weren't under there, but Sissy found a piece of chocolate. I let her eat it because I was being nice, and it was Christmas. After 20 minutes, I ran into the only other room in the apartment. That's what we called our house. It was still all dark out, my uncovered feet pressed against the carpet. My toes were cold and tingly feeling, but my socks had holes in them, and I wanted to save them for later. I pushed Mama awake a few times. She must have gotten home from work only an hour ago. She worked as a server at something called a bar. That meant she helped everyone eat yummy food. Sometimes she'd bring some home for us. Those were special nights where everyone would laugh more. Mama wouldn't look so sad, and she would smile with her pretty teeth. Mama woke up. She was still sleepy. Mama, I think Santa put the gifts somewhere tricky. They're not under the tree or in the TV room or in the fireplace. I even checked the fridge. Mama's face got all scrunched up. Her eyes looked wet. She made a MHM sound to get the crusties out of her voice. Her voice was a tiny little whisper, like she was in trouble. Baby, I think Santa got lost this year again. He tried very hard to come. He was trying all last night, but I mean he couldn't. He couldn't find us again. My eyes starting burning. I felt embarrassed like the time I had an accident at school in my big girl clothes. My face was all hot, and my throat felt tight, like I want to cough really hard. Santa got lost again. The rest of Christmas felt bad. I felt like I was grounded for something I didn't do. My sister cried the whole entire day. Mama told me not to cry, or I'd make Sissy sadder, and to be a good girl. She said if I was extra nice this year, Santa would definitely find us next time, that he'd feel all my goodness, and our apartment would glow up for him nice and bright. I didn't cry in front of them like Mama asked. Instead, that night, I covered my head with a blanket so Santa wouldn't see. And then I cried myself to sleep. Going back to school the next week made my tummy feel funny. I remember sitting in class the day after Christmas vacation ended. I was surrounded by kids wearing big new jackets, pretty furry boots, and holding on to each other as they argued over who got the best gift. Stephen bragged about his new walkie-talkies. Mary, a girl who always teased me for wearing the same clothes too many days in a row, got a Barbie dream house with a pink car. Rachel got a real-life puppy. She said it looked like Snoopy. She named him Santa. I had my head laid flat down on the desk. Sissy wasn't here with me, and I was happy she was out sick, because she would probably be crying again. Someone poked me hard on my back. It kind of hurt. Then they asked me, "What did you get from Santa?" I felt like everyone in the room got all quiet, like someone asked me a secret. I kept my head down. Then I did something bad. Something really, really bad. I lied. I got a Barbie dream house, and I got 2 whole Barbies in a car, and clothes for them too. I thought my voice sounded funny. Someone said, Wow, you're so lucky. Another one said, score. But then Mary opened her big mouth. She's lying. Santa wouldn't have gotten her more stuff than me. Her mommy told my mommy she didn't think Santa could even come to their place this year. And my face got hot again, and my throat hurt like I was sick, and I didn't say a single thing, because the truth was that I wasn't good enough this year for Santa. He couldn't find my house because it didn't glow enough, my house that was too dark and too small, and my tree that didn't have lights because it was only made out of paper. That was last year, though. I've been extra good this year. I wrote a letter to Santa in class all by myself today, too. Dear Santa, I have been very good this year. I do not ever fight with me sister. I always help Mama with cleaning, and I do all of me homework. Can you please come to our apartments? It will be so bright in there, so you can see it better. Sissy will be so sad if you get lost again. Seriously, thank you, and I love you so much. Sissy wrote one too, but hers just asked for chocolates and a puppy. When I gave mine to the teacher, her face got all sad. She said that Santa would definitely find our house this year, and she would talk to his little helpers for us. She told me all of our letters were going to be mailed right to the North Pole. She gave mine a stamp with a candle on it and mistletoe. I hope that doesn't mean I have to kiss someone, but she said the candle would make my letter shine bright, and she patted my hair. The days after flew by so fast, but I was excited. I had a plan for Santa this year. Now it's the night before Christmas. Mama is home. We had yummy food tonight. She called it meatloaf, and she got it from her work. It smelled like bacon and hamburgers, and it tasted like heaven. That's what Mama said anyways. Mama was smiling a lot and showing her teeth. That's how I knew it was a real smile and not a lie one. Are you girls excited for Santa this year? She asked, all smiley. Me and Sissy looked up at her. I smiled back. Yeah, because I know a way to make sure Santa finds us this time. Mama smiled. She brushed my hair out of my eyes. I don't think you need to worry about that this time, sweetheart, okay? I felt all warm inside. I already knew I didn't have to worry about it. My plan was going to work. When Mama went to bed early, she said she had a headache. It meant her head was maybe going to explode, I think. She always said it felt like that. Sissy went up to bed right after. She said she wanted to sleep so Santa could come sooner. It was snowing outside and dark out, but the flakes looked pretty. I sat on our smelly couch, and I waited. I waited until the house was super duper quiet. I closed Mama and Sissy's door and locked them real good. I hid the keys under the couch cushions. I didn't want them to wake up and ruin the surprise. Then I grabbed all the candles in the house. I found newspapers and something called bills and some of my homework with bad grades that I was saving for Mama's smiley days. I put the Christmas music on from earlier. It was loud, but not too loud, just enough so Santa could hear. They were going to be so happy when they woke up. I looked into Mama's purse. Bingo! I pulled out her lighter with the smiley face and hit her smokies too, and I got to work. After I finished, the room was so bright. It looked like the lights were on. I was tired. I did a lot of work, but it was worth it. I don't remember falling asleep on the floor. All I remember was the warm, big fire in the fireplace, the candles all around the room making the house glow, and I knew that Santa wouldn't get lost this time. I woke up a little after. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up because I was too hot. The air felt funny. My throat was burning, and the room was a little too bright. Whoa, the room was way too bright. I tried to cover my eyes. I couldn't see for a second. There was a sound of monster roaring. It almost covered the Christmas music. It felt windy, but like windy in the summertime. Hot and dry and strong. I opened my eyes again, this time peeking through my fingers. The room was on fire. It was big on fire. I felt scared. Really, really scared. I was sweaty and my eyes were burning so bad. My heart was thumping all funny. Too fast, and some of the beats started going missing like when Sissy would scare me. I started crying loud. I wanted to run away, but I was still thinking of Sissy. And then I thought something sad and bad and all my fault. Mama and Sissy were still sleeping. The doors were locked up, and it was all my fault. I needed to open Mama's and Sissy's rooms right now. I tried ripping the couch cushions off, but they were so hot because they were on fire, and my fingers were hurting. Then I heard noises coming from the chimney, and I stopped because something was in there. I heard screaming, rustling, scraping of skin on brick. The yells were deep and angry sounding. The fire was shooting up, and whoever it was couldn't come down. It smelled like meatloaf again, like hamburgers and bacon. But this time it made me feel sick. I could hear animals outside too. They must have been big and covered in bells, because each time they neighed all loud like that I could hear chimes with the snorts and hooves. And now I knew that something that was stuck in the chimney was Santa, and he was on fire too. I cried and yelled for help. The big fire moved down the hallway, all by itself. I was so scared, but I yelled until my voice went funny and my throat felt like it was on fire too. Santa was screaming still. I was screaming too. I tried to open the front door, but the doorknob burned my fingers. A black boot fell out of the chimney. There was meatloaf in it. It burned up real quick. A neighbor found me, the old lady across the street. She broke the door in and ran inside. Her eyes were huge. She scooped me up on the floor and put me in the snow. She was screaming so much. It scared me. When the police and the fire trucks and the ambulances came, I was still burnt and I smelled like meatloaf. I didn't have any hair left. Every time I moved, pieces would fall down just like the snowflakes. They put me in the big ambulance truck, and the police asked me so many questions. They kept asking why I made the fire, why I locked Mama and Sissy up, how I could do that to them. I told them in my new scratchy voice that it was so Santa could find us. And I told him how he got stuck in the chimney. And I think he got burned up. And I told them that he finally found us. And I asked if Mama and Sissy found him and left with him. They looked at me not smiley, and some of them were crying. They didn't find Santa. They only found Mama and Sissy, but they weren't Mama and Sissy anymore. I heard one of the officers say that they looked like coal, and then the ambulance truck left. I watched the glowing apartment get smaller and smaller from the weird bed I was in. I watched until it looked like a star. I saw Santa's sleigh fly by over Star 2. I tried to tell the ambulance people, but they gave me a shot, and then I fell asleep. That was last Christmas. I live in a home now with lots of other sad kids. Some of them scream all day. Some of them hurt each other. Some of them hurt themselves. Now it's Christmas today again. That means it's been a whole year without Mama and Sissy, without them in my new big house. I miss our stinky couch. I wish we still had our paper tree. All I want is to grow up so I can have a new family, a family that is just like Mama and Sissy. I'm always sad, and I think I don't like myself anymore, but I don't cry because Mama said it'd be good last time. But sometimes it's hard to be good here. People are mean, and it smells bad, and nighttime is scary. I have nightmares about a glowing house and smell that meatloaf stink. Sometimes I hear little bells tinkling when I'm trying to sleep in the crowded room. And sometimes I hear big animal hooves scratching at the window, but I'm too nervous to look. This morning I saw big boot prints around the outside of the house. It was all the same shoe. Then this afternoon I saw something moving in the fireplace for a second. It looked like an elf sword, but real ugly. Its eyes were all red. It was making angry eyes and snapped its teeth at me. I ran and sat in the kitchen for the rest of the day. Later, before sleep time, one of the helper ladies in the house told me there was a big present for me upstairs on my bed, that it was sent from someone special, and it was just for me. I didn't care about presents anymore, but I still opened it. I opened it because it had my name written all pretty. I opened it because it said it was from Santa. Maybe it had a way to get Mama and Sissy back. Something that could make them not cold, but real people again. It was wrapped in golden paper. So bright it glowed against the dirty beige walls. I opened it slowly because my hands don't work right anymore. The new skin is all tight and achy. I finally got it open, and inside were 2 pieces of coal. I was naughty last year. Story 3. They crawl. I'm a father. Or at least I was. After the day's events, I no longer know who I am. I'm so broken. Sleep was something that had returned to my life. Compared to an infant months of restless nights, it was heaven having a 2-year-old. But it was with mixed feelings that our son, Mikey, was finally old enough for daycare. Myself and my wife miss him a little. For the few hours each day he was away, we both worked from home, and the house felt a little empty without him. But otherwise all was fine until today. 2 p.m. rolled around, and Jen asked me to bring some butter home as I headed out to pick up Mikey. It all went downhill from there. First was a flat tire. I rolled over a piece of wood with a nail in it that must have fallen off a truck. I had the spare on in no time, but I would be late to pick up Mikey, and that frustrated me. I guess I was a little embarrassed arriving late, as if this made me a bad parent. Mikey himself wouldn't mind or even notice. He'd be engrossed with the extensive collection of toys there. When I pulled up at the daycare, 30 minutes late, I was surprised to see a lot of cars in the lot, but the little playground outside was empty. When I entered the small one-story building, all was quiet. A large woman who usually mans the front desk was gone. Left for the day, maybe. I let myself through into the hallway. It was also empty. A tricycle sat there, abandoned under the pale strip lights. As I walked further down the hall, I called out, "Hello." My voice was loud in the silence. And then I stopped, frozen in my tracks. On the ground in front of me was a footprint. It was red. It was blood. I couldn't be sure, but it was not a child's footprint. I tried not to panic. It's dye, or it's paint, or it's jam. I told myself all the harmless things it could be, and I pushed away the invasive thoughts of kidnapping and mass murder and shooters. But I was now too afraid to call out, although every part of me wanted to scream Mikey's name. And then at the end of the hall, movement. A small form crawled quickly out of one door and into another. The silence broken only by the creak of the door as it swung open and closed again. I hurried forward towards the door where the child had disappeared. When I got to the door, I looked through the small glass panel, but the lights were off. I quietly pushed the door open and felt for the switch on the wall. When I found it, dozens of eyes turned in my direction, child eyes reacting to the light. And under the children were corpses, parents, the daycare staff, Debbie, the large woman from reception, all lifeless and soaked in their own blood. The children's mouths were red too, as if they'd been feeding on the adults. I felt puke rise up from my stomach, but I held it in. I had no time to be sick. One of the kids broke away from its meal and scurried on all fours towards me. I slammed the door in her face. Like hell that thing was getting near me. I peered back through glass. The little girl was banging her head on the door, trying to get at me. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The other children crawled over to join her. I searched desperately with my eyes. Mikey wasn't there. The banging was increasing. Faster, more heads. So I ran for it. I checked other doors as I hurried through the hall. Behind me, the tiny, but somehow very speedy mob of toddlers crawled after me. I had to be quick. Where was Mikey? I tripped over the damn trike, banding my knee badly and twisting something in my ankle. I yelled out in pain, but was up again, now limping. I entered the closest door and shut it behind me. There was no lock, so I jammed a chair under the handle. The only full-size chair in the room. It was a playroom. Everything else was child-sized, including the child who sat facing away from me in the center of the playroom floor. Mikey? The kid turned toward me. Not Mikey, he was Asian, with a bowl cut, his mouth bloody, his pupils large and black like grapes. He stood and waddled towards me. And I'm so ashamed, but out of fear I kicked out with my good leg, and I booted that small child. He flew a few meters across the room, tumbling through wooden blocks and stuffed toys. But in a moment he was upright again like a cat, like nothing happened. He came running back towards me. I grabbed a chair from under the door and pulled it open. I used the chair as a shield from the swarm outside the door, pushing the savages out of the way. The chair leg caught a chubby kid in the eye, and he growled at me like a feral dog. I felt terrible. Did I hurt him? Then Kid grabbed the chair leg and somehow wrenched it from my grasp, shocked by their strength. I retreated as best I could on my busted ankle. They were quick, but their legs, little, The last door left unexplored were the toilets. Once inside, there was nothing to block the door with. Just 3 stalls and a couple miniature urinals. I pushed open the first stall, and there he was. Mikey, my boy, my angel. But he was different. He sat there quietly on the toilet, gnawing on something. "Mikey," I said, "it's Daddy." He barely looked up, but enough for me to see that his eyes had changed too, and that he was chewing on a dismembered ear. The swarm was coming through the door from the hall now. I shut the little stall door, locking me and Mikey inside. Heartbroken, my eyes full of tears, I tried to stroke Mikey's hair. In return, he lunged and tried to go for my neck. After a prolonged struggle and many scratches, I managed to restrain him with my sweater. I can't bear to see him like this, hog-tied on the floor, riding around furiously. The other kids banging on the stall door. There's no way out, and I'll have to call for help soon. I just want to spend a little more time with my only boy. Story 4, Mr. Purpleface. The house smelled like wet wool and Jim Beam. It was a gray box at the end of a dirt road that washed out every spring. Inside, the walls were bare. There were nails sticking out of plaster in the hallway, but nothing hanging on them. In the bathroom, there was one toothbrush in a cup and a bar of gritty soap that smelled like pumice. It was just me and Dad. Dad was a big guy, broad-shouldered and heavy. He worked at the lumber yard. He came home every day at 5:30 with sawdust caught in his eyebrows. We had a routine. He would wash his hands at the kitchen sink, scrubbing until his skin was red. Then he would heat up dinner. Usually it was chili from a can or hot dogs boiled in water. We ate standing up at the counter. "How was school?" he'd ask. "Fine," I'd say. "Learn anything?" "Math." Good. That was it. That was the window of time where he was my dad. At 6:30, he would put his plate in the sink. He would walk to the cabinet above the refrigerator and take down the square bottle. Then he would grab a glass and go to the table. The kitchen table was small, pushed right up against the wall. He dragged his chair around so he wasn't facing the room. He faced a window. Our backyard was overgrown. Just waist-high weeds and an old rusted swing set I wasn't allowed to touch. Along the back fence, there was a massive tangle of wild rose bushes, a wall of thorns. Dad sat there and watched those roses. He poured the whiskey. No ice. He drank it like it was medicine. By the second glass, the air in the house got heavy. He didn't yell right away. He just stopped moving. He would stare at the window glass, tapping his finger against the table over and over again. I knew that rhythm. That rhythm meant I needed to be invisible. I would take my toy cars into the living room. I learned to roll them on the rug, because if I rolled them on the hardwood floor, it made a rumble. If I made a rumble, Dad would snap. Quiet, he'd bark, not even turning around. So I played in silence. I built towers out of magazines and knocked them down in slow motion so they wouldn't crash. It was boring. Being afraid is mostly just being bored. You sit there with your knees pulled to your chest waiting for the grown-up to pass out, so you can go to the bathroom without getting yelled at. I didn't have anyone to talk to. No brothers, no sisters, no friends allowed over because the house is a mess. Even though the house was empty, that's why I wasn't scared when I saw the shadow. It was a Tuesday. It had been raining for 3 days. The roof was leaking in the bathroom, dripping into a bucket with a steady, maddening rhythm. Dad was on his 3rd glass. He was muttering at the window. I was behind the sofa. I looked up toward the hallway. There was something standing in the doorway. It was huge. It had a hunch its shoulders to fit under the frame. It wore a long, brown robe that looked stiff, like dried mud. It took a step. The heavy fabric crunched like crumbling paper. I pressed myself against the back of the sofa. I stopped breathing. The thing stepped into the living room light. Its face was a dark, shiny purple. It was swollen tight, like a balloon about to pop. It didn't have eyes, just 2 puffy slits. It didn't have a nose. Its mouth hung open, crooked, dangling to the left. It breathed with a wet, bubbling rattle. I stared at it. I waited for it to grab me. It didn't. It just stood there, swaying back and forth. It turned its head. It looked toward the kitchen. Dad was 10 feet away. He was staring at the window, swirling his drink. "Dad!" I whispered. He didn't hear me, but the thing did. The purple head turned. It ground on its neck. It looked down at me. I squeezed my eyes shut. I heard the crunch of the stiff robe getting closer. I smelled wet dirt and old pennies. Then I felt a cold touch on my head. It patted my hair. It was a jerky, awkward motion. I opened one eye. The thing was kneeling in front of me. The swollen purple face was inches away. A string of spit hung from its crooked mouth. It patted me again. Dad coughed in the kitchen. The thing stood up, unfolding like a spider, and stepped back into the dark hallway. I touched my hair. It felt cold. He came back the next night. And the night after that, I named him Mr. Purpleface. He usually showed up around 7 o'clock, when Dad was deep in the bottle. He would stand in the corner by the TV watching. I realized pretty quick that Dad couldn't see him. Dad would walk right past him to get to the bathroom. He'd shiver, rub his arms, maybe mutter about a draft, but he never looked up. Mr. Purpleface became my secret. I started talking to him. "This is my red truck." I'd whisper, holding it up. Mr. Purpleface would lean down. He'd make that clicking sound deep in his throat. One night, Dad was really bad. He had lost his keys. He was tearing the living room apart, throwing cushions on the floor. "Where are they?" he screamed. He pointed a finger at me. "You took them." "I didn't," I said. "Don't lie to me." He took a step toward me. His face was red. He raised his hand. I flinched. Suddenly, Mr. Purpleface moved. He stepped out of the corner. He moved fast. He stood right between me and Dad. He spread his arms out wide. Dad stopped. He blinked. He looked confused. He looked right at Mr. Purpleface's chest. "Jesus," Dad muttered. He rubbed his face. "It's freezing in here." He turned around and stumbled back to the kitchen. Mr. Purpleface turned to me. He knelt down. He patted my head. He stayed there all night, standing guard by the sofa. For 2 years, that was my life. Me, Dad, and the guardian in the hallway. But when I turned 7, things changed. The rain started and didn't stop. The backyard turned into a swamp. And Dad stopped going to work. When Dad stopped going to work, the house felt different. It felt smaller. Before, I had the mornings to myself. I had the time between getting off the bus and him coming home to watch TV and eat snacks and pretend I was a normal kid. But after he lost his job, those hours were gone. He said he got laid off. He said the foreman was an idiot who didn't know good lumber from scrap. But even at 7 years old, I knew that wasn't true. I knew he got fired because he started smelling like whiskey at breakfast. He didn't leave the house anymore. He moved his life to the kitchen table. He stopped eating. I would come into the kitchen in the morning, and the can of chili I opened the night before would still be sitting on the counter. The sauce would be dried out and dark. He just drank, and he watched the yard. It was November, and the rain had started. It wasn't a storm. It was just a steady gray drizzle that never stopped. The dirt road turned into sludge. The backyard, which was already overgrown, started to look like a swamp. The water pooled around the swing set. It made the weeds look black and slimy. Dad became obsessed with it. He would sit there with his forehead pressed against the cold glass, fogging it up with his breath. "Look at it," he would mutter. "Just look at that mess." I would stand in the doorway, holding my cereal bowl. "Look at what?" "The mud," he said. "It's washing everything out. It's going to ruin the fence line." He turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he hadn't shaved in a week. His face looked gray. "Don't go out there," he said. "I won't," I said. "It's raining." "I mean it," he said. He grabbed the edge of the table. "I don't want you tracking that filth into the house. If I see you near that mud, I'll wear you out." He wasn't yelling. He said it quiet, like he was giving me advice. That was scarier than the yelling. I went back to the living room. Mr. Purpleface was there. He had changed too. In the beginning, he was calm. He was just a statue that stood in the corner. But now that Dad was home all day, Mr. Purpleface was restless. He wouldn't stay in the living room. He walked up and down the hallway, dragging that stiff brown robe on the carpet. He would walk to the edge of the kitchen, stand there for a minute, and then turn around. He seemed agitated. The wet, rattling sound in his throat was louder. It sounded like water bubbling in a pot. He started spending a lot of time by the kitchen door. He would stand just out of Dad's sight line. He would lean his swollen purple head against the doorframe and watch Dad drink. Sometimes he would raise a gray hand and reach out toward Dad. He didn't touch him. He just held his hand in the air like he was trying to grab something he couldn't reach. I tried to ignore it. I tried to play with my cars. But the air in the house was too tight. It felt like a rubber band that was pulled too far. On Thursday, the power went out. It was the middle of the day, but the sky was so dark it looked like night. The rain was coming down harder now. I could hear it hitting the roof. Dad didn't move when the lights went out. He was staring at the yard. "It never stops," he whispered. "Why won't it stop?" He stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the back door and opened it. The wind blew rain into the kitchen. It soaked the front of his shirt, but he didn't seem to notice. He stood there gripping the doorframe, staring at the rose bushes. "Hey," he yelled. It was the first time I heard him scream at the yard. "That's my property," he screamed. "Get off my property." I was hiding behind the sofa. I looked out the window. There was nobody in the yard. It was just rain and weeds. "I see you," Dad yelled at the empty yard. "You think I don't see you? I know what you're doing." Mr. Purpleface stepped out of the hallway. He walked past me. He didn't look at me this time. He moved fast. He walked right into the kitchen. The gray light from the open door hit him. His skin looked wet. The purple face shone like oil. He walked up behind Dad. He stood so close his chest was almost touching Dad's back. Dad was still screaming at the rain. "Get away from there. Leave it alone." Mr. Purpleface leaned down. He put his face right next to Dad's ear. I thought he was going to bite him. I thought he was going to tear Dad's throat out, but he didn't. He just opened his mouth. The crooked jaw hung loose. He breathed. A loud, wet rattle right in Dad's ear. Dad froze. He stopped screaming mid-word. He went rigid. He slapped his hand over his ear like a bug had flown into it. He spun around. Mr. Purpleface was standing right there. He was towering over Dad, but Dad looked right through him. Dad looked at the empty air where Mr. Purpleface's chest was. He looked around the kitchen wild-eyed. "Who's there?" Dad whispered. "Who did that?" Mr. Purpleface didn't move. He just stared down at Dad with those swollen shut eyes. Dad backed up until he hit the counter. He was breathing hard. He looked terrified. "Is someone in here?" Dad yelled. His voice cracked. "I'll call the cops. I have a gun." He didn't have a gun. He grabbed the whiskey bottle off the table and held it like a club. "Show yourself." Dad screamed. Mr. Purpleface leaned forward again. He reached out a long gray finger. He poked Dad in the chest. Dad gasped. He looked down at his shirt. He touched the spot where the finger had hit him. "Cold," Dad whimpered. "It's so cold." Dad ran. He didn't run at the ghost. He ran past him. He scrambled out of the kitchen and ran down the hall to his bedroom. He slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I heard the lock click. I was left alone in the living room. Mr. Purpleface turned around. He looked at me. He didn't look scary anymore. He looked sad. He walked over to where I was hiding. He crumpled down to the floor. His stiff robe crunched. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were freezing. We sat there for a long time listening to the rain and the sound of Dad cry in his bedroom. That weekend was the longest of my life. Dad didn't come out of his room for a day. I had to eat peanut butter out of the jar with a spoon. When he finally came out, he looked worse. His eyes were sunk deep in his head. He was shaking. He went straight to the kitchen. He didn't even look at me. He opened a new bottle. He sat at the table and resumed his watch. The rain didn't stop. It just kept coming. The backyard was a lake now. The water was brown and muddy. On Monday night, I woke up. It was quiet. The rain had slowed down to a drizzle. I heard a sound in the living room. It sounded like scratching. I got out of bed and crept to the door. Mr. Purple Face was standing at the back door in the kitchen. Dad had finally passed out. He was slumped over the table, his head resting on his arms. He was snoring. Mr. Purple Face was standing right next to him, but he wasn't looking at Dad. He was looking at the door. He was scratching at the wood with his gray fingernails. He wanted out. I walked into the kitchen. I stayed near the wall, so I wouldn't wake Dad up. Mr. Purple Face? I whispered. He stopped scratching. He turned his swollen head toward me. He pointed at the door. Then he pointed at the lock. He wanted me to open it. I shook my head. Dad said no. I whispered. Dad said I can't go near the mud. Mr. Purple Face tilted his head. He made a soft sound. It wasn't a rattle. It sounded like a whimper. He pointed at the door again. Then he pointed at the rose bushes out in the dark yard. He just pointed. His gray finger rested on the glass. I looked out. I couldn't see anything. It was just black shapes and rain. Is something out there? I asked. Mr. Purple Face didn't answer. He just stared at the yard. He stood there for a long time. Then he lowered his hand. He looked defeated. He turned back to the window and just watched the darkness. I went back to bed. The next day was Tuesday, the day everything ended. Tuesday night was when it ended. It was raining hard. The sound of it hitting the roof was loud enough to drown out the TV. I went to bed early because Dad was in a mood. He had been pacing the kitchen for hours, muttering to himself. He had finished one bottle and started another. I put my pillow over my head, but I could still hear his heavy footsteps vibrating through the floor. I fell asleep eventually. I woke up because the door in my bedroom slammed open. The hallway light was on. Dad was standing in my doorway. He looked huge. His shirt was unbuttoned and stained with sweat. He was holding the neck of the whiskey bottle in his right hand. "Get up," he said. His voice was thick. He was drunker than I had ever seen him. I sat up. I was shaking. "What?" "Get up," he yelled. "Stop hiding in here." He came into the room. He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He dragged me out of bed. "Dad, you're hurting me." I cried. "Shut up," he spat. "I'm sick of you sneaking around. I'm sick of you looking at me like that." He pulled me down the hallway. I tried to dig my heels into the carpet, but he was too strong. He dragged me into the kitchen. The bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The back door was cracked open just a little bit. Letting the cold rain blow in, he shoved me toward the corner. I slipped on the linoleum and fell hard on my knees. "Please," I whispered. Dad didn't hear me. He was breathing hard, his face red and twisted. He looked at me with pure hate. It wasn't about the rain. It wasn't about the yard. He just wanted to hurt something. "I give you a roof over your head," he shouted. "And you just sit there. You judge me." He raised a bottle. He held it like a club. He took a step toward me. He pulled his arm back to swing. I curled into a ball on the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my head with my hands. I waited for the glass to hit me, but it didn't. The air in the kitchen changed. It smelled like wet dirt. I opened my eyes. Mr. Purple Face was standing over me. He had stepped out of the shadows. He was standing between me and Dad. He was facing Dad. He looked huge under the kitchen lights. His brown robe was stiff and wet. Mud was dripping off the hem onto the clean floor. He had his arms spread out wide. He was shielding me. Dad stopped mid-swing. He blinked. He looked at the space in front of him. At first he looked confused. He squinted like he couldn't focus on the thing standing there. Then his eyes got wide. He dropped the bottle. It shattered on the floor. Brown whiskey splashed over his boots. Dad took a step back. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You!" Dad whispered. He looked up at the swollen purple face. He looked at the flat nose. He looked at the crooked jaw hanging loose. Dad let out a sound that didn't sound human. It was a high-pitched squeak. "No," Dad said. He held his hands up in front of his face. "No, stay back." Mr. Purple Face took a step forward. He leaned down. He put his face right in front of Dad's face. Dad screamed. It was a scream of pure terror. He scrambled backward. He slipped on the wet floor and fell hard. He crab walked backward into the corner by the stove. "Get away!" Dad shrieked. He was kicking his legs at the air. "Don't touch me! Stay away from me!" Mr. Purple Face just stood there blocking me. Dad was curled up in a ball, covering his head. He was sobbing. He was screaming about rocks and dirt. "I put you back!" Dad yelled, "I put you back!" I stayed on the floor behind Mr. Purple Face. I didn't move. Then I saw blue lights flashing the window. The neighbors must have heard the screaming. I heard the front door get kicked open. "Police! Police!" 2 officers ran into the kitchen. They had guns out. They saw Dad in the corner screaming at the empty air. They saw the broken bottle. They saw me on the floor crying. But they didn't see Mr. Purple Face. "Drop the weapon!" One cop yelled at Dad, even though Dad wasn't holding anything. Dad didn't hear them. He was pointing at Mr. Purple Face. "She's right there." Dad screamed, "She's right there. Don't let her touch me." The cops grabbed him. They wrestled him onto his stomach. They put handcuffs on him. Dad was still screaming. She came up. The rain washed her up. A lady officer came over to me. She picked me up. She carried me out of the kitchen. As we walked down the hall, I looked back over her shoulder. Mr. Purple Face was still standing in the kitchen. He was watching them take Dad away. He raised one gray hand and waved at me. Then he stepped back into the shadows. I sat in the back of a police car wrapped in a blanket. I watched them put Dad in another car. I thought he was going to jail for trying to hit me. I thought he was going to jail for being drunk. I didn't know the real reason. Not then. Social services took me that night. A few days later, my grandparents came to get me. My mom's parents. I hadn't seen them since I was a baby. They took me to their house 3 towns over. It was quiet there. Safe. I never went back to the house at the end of the dirt road. I lived with my grandparents until I was 18. They were good people. They lived in a brick house 3 towns over. They had a golden retriever and a backyard with a pool. There were no weeds. There were no roses. They never talked about my dad. They never talked about the house at the end of the dirt road. I went to therapy for a few years. The shrink told me I had an overactive imagination. She said Mr. Purple Face was a coping mechanism. She said I created a protector because my father was scary and I was lonely. It made sense. I wanted it to be true. So I believed her. I grew up. I went to college. I got a job in IT. I tried to be normal. I didn't think about the house for a long time. Last week my phone rang. It was a lawyer from the state. He told me my father was dead. He died in the infirmary at the state prison. His liver finally gave out. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy either. I just felt nothing. It was like hearing about a stranger dying on the news. The lawyer told me there were no assets. The house had been foreclosed on 20 years ago. There was no money, but the lawyer said, there is a box of personal effects. He listed you as next of kin. Do you want it, or should we dispose of it? I almost said dispose of it. I wanted to say it. Send it. I said, I don't know why. Maybe I just needed to see it to believe he was really gone. The box arrived yesterday. It was a small cardboard box taped shut with heavy packing tape. I put it on my kitchen table. I stared at it for an hour before I got a knife. I cut the tape. It smelled like him. Even after 20 years, it smelled like stale tobacco and mildew. It was mostly trash. A cheap watch, a lighter, a stack of letters he wrote to me but never mailed. I didn't read them. At the bottom of the box, there was a manila envelope. I opened it. Inside was a stack of old Polaroids. They were curling at the corners. The colors were faded and orange. I flipped through them. There was a picture of a truck I didn't recognize. There was a picture of the lumber yard. There was a picture of me as a baby sitting on a blanket in the grass. And then I found it, the last photo in the stack. It was taken in the kitchen. The old kitchen with the yellow linoleum and the fluorescent lights. Dad was sitting at the table. He was younger. He wasn't bloated from the drink yet. He was smiling at the camera, holding up a beer. Standing next to him with her arm around his shoulder was a woman, my mother. I had never seen a picture of her before. Grandparents didn't keep any around. She was small. She had dark hair and a shy smile. She looked happy, but I stopped breathing when I saw what she was wearing. It was a house coat, a long brown quilted robe that went down to her ankles. In the photo, it looked soft. It looked warm, but I knew that robe. I remembered the sound it made when it scraped the wall. I remembered how it dragged on the carpet. I remembered how stiff it was, caked in dried mud from the backyard. I leaned in closer. I looked at the collar of the robe. It had a pattern, small stitched diamonds. My hands started to shake. I remember that pattern. I used to stare at that exact pattern when I was hiding behind the sofa, praying for Dad to pass out. I looked at her face. It was smooth. It was unblemished. She had a small nose. She had bright eyes. She had a straight, happy smile. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I was back in that living room. I could smell the wet dirt. I could hear the wet, rattling breath. I could see the swollen purple skin, the flat nose, the crooked jaw hanging loose. I remembered the way she stood between me and him. I remembered the way she spread her arms out to take up the space, so he couldn't get to me. I put the photo down on the table. For 20 years, I thought she left me. Dad said she ran off. He said she didn't want a family, but she didn't run off. She was there the whole time. She was standing in the hallway, watching him. She was waiting for the rain to wash the dirt away so she could come back inside. She never left me. Story 5. Stripes. When I was younger, bedtime was always a difficult and scary thing for me. I wasn't scared of the dark, but rather something entirely sinister in its own right. My young mind always chalked it up to dreaming or my family playing jokes on me. Looking back, I feel like an absolute idiot for even thinking that my family members would go through the effort of trying to mess with me so late into the night. Well, family member, I should say. It was just me and my mom growing up. Mom was an artist, or at least she was super into artsy stuff when I was younger. She was particularly interested in the making of clothes. Consequently, we had a few mannequins in the house. They'd always stay in her study where she used them for fitting. I wish we could have realized what was happening sooner. Often, I'd have bad dreams, terrifying experiences that my mind conjured up when I went to sleep. I think that was why it was so hard to come to terms with it. It was also the main reason why going to bed was such a difficult task for me. I'm still not sure whether the first couple were nightmares or not. I vividly remember all 3 times I experienced it. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I'd gotten into bed and was actually able to fall asleep without much trouble. What didn't happen so easily was staying asleep. At first, it was blackness, and then my eyes opened. I was in my room, still in my bed. Something was different, though. My room was much darker than it had been a few hours earlier, which made sense, considering it just naturally got darker the later it was. That wasn't what scared me, though. What scared me so badly I hid under the covers was a figure standing in the middle of my bedroom. The only reason I could even see them was due to the faint bits of moonlight streaming in from between my blinds. I looked at the figure just long enough to make out some slight details on what they were wearing. They stood stock still, clad in a pair of black, what I assumed to be dress pants and a white shirt with black stripes. That was it. I couldn't make out their face. Not that it mattered. They just stood there motionless. I didn't suppress a scream. Rather, I couldn't. I was so completely and utterly terrified in that very moment that I could do nothing but retreat into my covers and wait until it went away. I might have fallen asleep. Not sure. Can't really remember. All I do remember is hiding under my covers one moment and waking up to a brightly sunlit room the next. The figure was gone, so I assumed I'd had a dream. I still wasn't sure, so I asked my mom about it during breakfast. "Hey, Mom," I said, Did you put one of your mannequins in my room?" Her face went from calm to nervous. "What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that?" "Oh, okay," I said. It was probably a dream then. "What?" she asked. It looked like a person in my room, but I could barely see them or anything. When I woke up, it didn't look like anyone had been in my room. I think it was a dream. I said, she said, "Sounds weird. You let me know if anything happens, okay?" "Okay." I feel the need to state that my mother is not, and has never been a stupid person. She thought out the possibilities. She searched the whole house after we talked and found nothing. She could have thought that my dreams, though vivid, might have not been just dreams. But I digress. There was no way anyone could have broken in. She even checked our cellar, and the parts of it we refused to go in. Nothing. The fact that she found nothing makes what happened even harder to think of, to explain, but I'll do my best. The last incident happened about a week after first. I had just gotten to sleep and was having a relatively good dream when it was interrupted. This time, there was an actual noise. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock falling off my dresser and crashing to the floor. I was sure that I'd kept it well away from the edge of my dresser, but I could have been wrong, thinking that I just placed it too haphazardly. I undid my covers a little and leaned out and down to pick it up. I recoiled in horror. There, sticking out slightly from under my bed, was an arm. Not a severed one. It was clearly attached to someone. The alarm clock hadn't landed near the hand, so I couldn't make it out, but I just assumed it was a similar situation to the one I'd experienced a week prior. The light glow of my alarm clock showed me that the arm belonged to the same figure I'd seen, the same white shirt with black stripes. I shot back and once again retreated to the safe space that was my blanket. I shut my eyes tight. Somehow, despite the unyielding terror I felt witnessing that very same figure under my bed, I managed to fall asleep. The next morning, Mom was pissed. I'd gone downstairs for breakfast, once again preparing to tell her about what I thought might have been a dream. She was in a mood, though, apparently. Some animal had been messing around outside our house and broke one of the windows leading into the cellar. She was grumbling about two things. One, the fact that whatever animal had broken the window might have still been in the cellar. When she checked, some items had been shuffled around, most notably near the dark crawl space-like area. Two, how she was going to afford to fix the window. Both her. And I found out that she wouldn't need to worry about getting it repaired when I tried to speak to her. "What?" she snapped. I stuttered. "Sorry," she said, just a little peeved about the window. "What do you want to tell me?" I saw it again. I said, "The figure. I think I was dreaming." "You dream about that a lot," she said. "Do you remember anything from it?" "It was wearing one of the striped shirts you made." I said. My mother's face went still. She didn't speak much just then. When she did, though, it was serious. She grabbed me by the hand, and we moved towards the front door. As I was getting my shoes on, I asked her a question. "Why are you upset?" She didn't answer until we were out of the house and in her car. As she started it, she looked at me and spoke with a very serious tone. "I didn't do that. I never made any striped shirts." We moved out that same day. Story 6. They call it the Bright Room. That afternoon, I had no idea where he was taking me. He had been my best friend since preschool. His real name was Mike, but for some reason everyone had always called him B, even back then. Whenever I asked him why, he'd come up with a different story every time. After a while, I just stopped caring. I only called to Mike when something was really serious. Now, as second-year college students, we were still on the same course, still inseparable after all these years. But that Friday night started differently than usual. Greg, B burst through the door of my dorm room. Greg, you have to see this. Come on, man, get up. I took off my headphones and glared at him, half annoyed. I was studying for next week's exams, and the last thing I wanted was another one of his impulsive adventures. Greg, B pleaded, putting on that pathetic face of his. Dude, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. I kept the same blank stare, just to make sure he knew how much he was annoying me. Mike, listen, I said once I realized he wasn't leaving. I really don't have time for this right now. Don't start with that, he interrupted. Don't Mike me, man. We can't skip this. Oh, and Greg, Emma's coming too. I tried to play it cool. I knew B too well to think he was lying. But Emma was different. She'd been my crush for years, though I never had the guts to make a move. And B knew that better than anyone. He knew that once her name came up, there was no way I could say no. B, I sighed. What exactly are we doing? That's when B slapped a card down on my desk. It looked more like an invitation than a business card. White, with 5 black symbols arranged in a circle. A bull, a rooster, a dog, a bird, and a human figure. I just stared at him. Don't tell me you don't know what this is? B asked, seeing my blank face. I shook my head. I had no clue what kind of invitation this was supposed to be when I picked up the card. The black shape seemed to move for a second. I blinked, and they were still just smudges of ink again. Grab your coat, he said. I'll explain on the way. The house we were heading to was in the suburbs, and once we explained what we were going to see, I instantly regretted agreeing to come. We were going to see the bright room. I had no idea what that meant. He only spoke in riddles. He kept saying things like, we'll watch the shadows, see the spirit world, witness the strange room. None of it made sense. The only thing I was hoping for was that Emma would actually show up, and that B hadn't just used her name to trick me into coming along. When we got off the bus, we found ourselves in a deserted neighborhood. It was the edge of the suburbs, neat, well-kept houses, but under the blanket of night, everything felt empty and lifeless. Come on, Greg, B whispered. It's down there at the end of the street. We only had to walk a few minutes. The next street looked the same, quiet, orderly, calm. But in front of one house, where the porch light was still on, Emma was waiting. She stood wrapped up in her coat, her pretty blonde hair half covered by a knit cap. Her thin, graceful face was tense as her eyes darted nervously around the dark street. I waved from afar, so she'd see it was us. When she spotted me, I could tell she relaxed a little, relieved she wouldn't have to stand there alone in the dark anymore. Hey, Em, I said softly once we reached her. Hey, Greg, she replied with that warm, sweet voice of hers. I was starting to think you weren't coming. Yeah. Hey, Emma. Be cut in, brushing her off. All right, what are we waiting for? Let's go in. Emma and I exchanged a look, that silent kind of glance that said everything. I knew B had dragged her into this madness, too. He'd convinced her to take part in whatever this was, probably just to make sure I'd come along. B was already at the front door, pressing the doorbell. It opened almost immediately. The man who opened it wasn't exactly reassuring. He was tall and thin, his head shaved completely bald. His eyes looked tired, yet sharp and watchful. He stood there shirtless, even though it was the middle of winter. But the worst thing was the collar around his neck. It was made of leather, decorated with golden etchings. Around it, engraved in a pattern, were the same 5 symbols from the card. Tickets? The man rasped in a hoarse, metallic voice. B instantly pulled the card from his pocket, the same one he'd shown me earlier, and handed it to him. The tall man inspected it carefully, then stepped aside without a word. Gesturing for us to enter, B hurried inside first. Emma and I hesitated for a moment, then followed, uneasy and uncertain. There were already quite a few people waiting inside. Some were around our age, others looked rough, shady even, an old man, a few ordinary folks. There must have been about 20 of us gathered in that large living room. The place looked like it belonged to some elderly lady. The furniture had to be 100 years old, at least, but the first thing that caught my attention was the strange door from the living room. You could go into the kitchen or into another room, the one with the locked door. But this door was covered in symbols again, not just the door itself, but the wall around it too, painted over in white markings that circled it like a frame. Em gripped my arm tightly. I could tell she was scared. Honestly, so was I. Mike, I whispered to him, "Where the hell did you bring us?" "Sit," said the tall man who had appeared behind us. But he didn't answer. He just dropped onto one of the nearby couches. And I followed his lead. A man was already sitting there, smoking a cigarette. I could see the tension on his face. He looked like someone waiting for something he'd started to regret. Then, suddenly, a large wall clock chimed loudly. M and I both flinched. B, on the other hand, sat there like an excited little kid, eager for what was coming next. The tall man glanced at the clock, then walked over to a small cabinet. I sat frozen on the couch, barely breathing. The apartment was stiflingly warm, but I didn't dare take off my coat. M kept glancing at me nervously, as if hoping I had answers. The tall man stepped in front of the group, standing just before the strange door, while the rest of us sat in a half circle around him. 1 a.m., he said calmly. "We begin." I shot a nervous look at Mike. I was pissed. How the hell did he think this was going to be fun? And why did he have to drag Emma into this bullshit? "You will draw," the man continued. "Once everyone is drawn, we'll reveal them together." He reached into the cabinet and pulled out a black cloth bag. Then he started walking around, stopping in front of each person so they could draw something from it. Each one pulled out a small folded piece of paper, sealed shut with tape, all identical in size. When it was our turn, I hesitated before sticking my hand into the bag. Emma's hand trembled as she reached in. I couldn't tell if it was fear or that deep instinct that told her this was a mistake. The tall, half-naked man stepped back into the center of the half-circle. "Now," he said quietly, "you may open them." Most people tore theirs open right away. A chorus of frustrated groans followed, like gamblers losing their final bets. Mike ripped his open too. His paper was blank. He slammed his hand down on the arm of the couch like an angry child. "God damn it," he growled. "Yours empty too, Greg." I finally looked down at mine, slowly unfolded it. On the paper, among the strange symbols, was the figure of a man, just a black, crude outline, like something drawn on a cave wall, still glistening as if the ink were wet. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, angrier now. "You didn't even want to come, and you get picked? Want to trade, Greg?" I opened my mouth to say, "Sure, take it. Anything to get out of this creepy cult crap." But the tall man cut him before I could speak. I hadn't even noticed him move closer. "No trades," he said flatly. "We have the man and the rooster." I turned toward Emma. She had opened hers too. On her paper was a rooster. Mike looked furious, like a kid who'd just been left out of the game. "If I'm not mistaken," the tall man said, stepping back to the center, "we have everyone we need." Most of the fancy crowd left. Anyone who'd drawn a blank slip and had no reason to stick around basically walked out right away. He stayed with us. He sat on the couch, sulking, clutching our coats until we could finally take them off. The 5 of us were now standing in the small semicircle where the half-naked man had been. He'd gone upstairs, said he'd be right back. 10 minutes passed, then 20, and he still hadn't come down. The 5 of us in the middle were the ones who pulled the marked papers tonight. I'd drawn the man M had the rooster. A young, pimply kid got the bull. A middle-aged woman with a severe face had the dog. And finally, a big bearded guy held the bird. I looked at them, half expecting somebody to say something useful. Instead, they all wore the same blank, worried expression. Nobody knew what was coming next. The tall, half-naked man finally returned and planted himself in front of us, carrying a heavy wooden box. He didn't say a word. He just set it down and opened it. Inside, it was lined with velvet. The velvet had 5 little compartments, each separated from the others. Nestled in those compartments were small black wooden figurines, the same ones from the cards. The tall man still didn't speak. I watched, tense, wondering what this ritual even meant. He gently took the wooden figures out one by one and handed each to the person who'd drawn the corresponding paper. When he finished, he closed the box and faced us. "Now you will see what you get to see," he said, cold as ice. "But there are rules. Break them, and this won't end well." "Excuse me," the bearded man interrupted. "Nobody told us we could die over this." "That's why there are rules," the tall man said, expressionless. "The most important rule, once you place a figurine, you do not move it. The second, once I lock the door on you, I do not open it until you say the proper phrase. In any other case, the door stays shut." Em squeezed my arm again. I could see she was terrified, and I felt it too. Every hair on my neck was standing up. I kept thinking the same thing. I shouldn't have come. Mike is going to get us all into deep shit. The tall man explained the rest of the rules. The whole idea was that he'd lock us inside the strange room, the one with the painted door. Once inside, we had to place the figurine we'd been given, and then watch the shadow that appeared. But we weren't allowed to look away, not even for a second. "Everyone understands?" the half-naked man asked. We all nodded timidly. I don't think anyone really understood what this was. Maybe it was just some elaborate prank meant to freak us out. Then the last thing, the tall man said, stepping up beside the strange door. "Each of you has a sentence, the phrase that will let you out. You simply say what you are and that you want to leave." I glanced around, wary. Everyone had that same uneasy expression, like we were all questioning why the hell we were still there. For example, the tall man cleared his throat. "So it's clear, this is what you say, 'I am the bird. I would like to come out.' If I don't hear those words, I don't open the door." Everyone gave nervous smiles and nodded, like obedient school children or tourists laughing at a bad tour guide joke. One exception, the tall man said, pointing straight at me. The man does not speak. The man endures." Understood. Wait, what?" I stammered, though I don't even know why I tried to respond. "The man says nothing," he repeated. "The man waits. He must remain inside for 5 minutes. No more, no less." I swallowed hard. I knew I should have walked out right then, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him go pale as snow. She was scared for me, and part of me found comfort in that. But my stomach twisted into knots at the sound of his words. "Now then," the tall man continued calmly, "if everything's clear, behold the wonder." Then he reached for the handle and opened the strange door. Everyone was waiting for something big to happen. Maybe someone would jump out of the room, or some cheap scare would make us all scream and laugh. Then we'd chuckle about it, and everyone would go home. But there was nothing like that inside the room. In fact, there was nothing at all. It was a small, almost completely empty space, like someone had cleared out a bedroom until not a single thing remained. The walls were freshly painted white, smooth and spotless. The only thing in the room was a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. No fixture, no shade, just a bulb dangling right in the center. Its harsh glow was so bright it almost burned your eyes if you looked at it too long. "The first," said the tall man firmly, "the first is always the bird. He begins the path." The bearded man hesitated. I could see he was terrified, but so were the rest of us. You could tell by the silence and the way no one moved. Every one of us regretted coming here tonight. "The verse must be spoken," the tall man said. "We have brought out the relics. The verse cannot be left unsaid." Em shot me a questioning look. She wanted me to tell her what was going on, but I just shook my head. I had no idea what any of this meant, or what that strange man was talking about. The bearded man took a deep breath, then stepped up to the door. "What do I have to do?" he asked, glancing between the empty room and the man standing by the door. "Just go in, little bird," said the half-naked man calmly. "Place your figurine on the black mark. Follow the rules. I'll handle the rest." The bearded man nodded. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. Then, swallowing hard, he stepped into the room. Nothing happened. You'd expect something. The man to collapse, the door to slam shut, but there was only silence. He simply knelt and placed a tiny black bird figurine in the center of the floor. The room didn't change, not even a flicker of the light. The bird flies through the night, the strange man said in a low, rhythmic tone, almost like reciting a poem, and slowly, gently, he closed the door. Time felt like it had stopped. The silence was suffocating. We couldn't hear a single sound from inside the room. Not even a shuffle, not a breath. And then suddenly, it was the bearded man's voice, but it kept breaking. I am the bird. Please, let me out. The half-naked man had been standing there, perfectly still, as if waiting for that moment, the instant he heard the words. He stepped forward and swiftly opened the door. The bearded man stood there exactly as he had been when the door closed on him. Inside the room, there was nothing but him and the little black figurine. The white walls still gleamed under the harsh, blinding light. But the man was crying, not just tearing up, sobbing, like a child. I had never seen a grown man cry like that before. No one said a word. He stumbled out of the room, wiping his face, sniffling through his tears. I know, said the tall man softly, patting his back as he passed. The bird weighs heavy on the soul. But you're free now, Greg. I don't want to go in, came a whisper. The shock of it all had made me miss how badly Em was shaking. The fear on her face was unbearable. And as much as I wanted to protect her, to pull her out of this nightmare, I had no idea what to say. What did you see? Someone from the half-circle asked. The bearded man was still fighting back tears, then silently walked toward the kitchen. A woman from the group got up and followed him. I believe the next is the rooster, the tall man said calmly, his eyes shifting to Emma. Em didn't move. She just stared ahead, clutching the small wooden rooster in her trembling hands. Sir, I started when she still didn't react. I think maybe we'll sit this one out. The man's face didn't change. He just looked straight through me, as if I weren't even there. There is no sitting out, he said after a long silence. The verse must be completed. Otherwise, we will all be in danger. I don't know about that. I began. It's okay, Greg, and interrupted softly. I can do this. I looked at her. She was still shaking, still terrified, but I could tell something in her had steadied. So I nodded and stepped into the room. The tall man retrieved the small bird figurine from the center of the floor. Em knelt and placed her wooden rooster in its place, right on the mark. The rooster calls and silence comes. The strange man intoned, again in that eerie, rhythmic voice. Then, slowly, calmly, he closed the door. Em looked back at me one last time. Her wide brown eyes met mine, full of fear. Everyone was holding their breath again. I was terrified for Em, and I could tell the others were just as tense. No one even dared to move. The tall man stood by the door, staring blankly into space. Yet his posture made it clear he was ready, waiting for the moment she'd say the words that would let her out. Then someone screamed. The sound came from inside the room, but it echoed strangely, as if it were trapped within metal walls. It was Em. I knew her voice instantly. Then she screamed again. Before I could stop myself, I rushed toward the door, but the tall man reacted instantly. "We don't open it," he barked, stepping in front of the door. "Not until she says the words. Get the hell out of my way." I yelled furiously. I tried to shove him aside, but the moment my hand touched his shoulder, he twisted my arm in one brutal motion and slammed me to the floor. "Ah!" Em cried from inside. "Help me? Somebody, please." Her voice was high and broken, almost shrieking with panic. She was screaming, pounding, clawing at the door. "Em!" I shouted back from the floor. The tall man didn't loosen his grip. He was thin, but impossibly strong. I couldn't move an inch. The others just stared in shock. No one moved. I saw it in their faces. They were frozen in fear, every single one of them. Even Mike, pale as a ghost, sat curled up on the couch, doing nothing. "Greg!" Em screamed. "Greg, help me. Please, let me out. Let her out." I bellowed, my throat burning. The man didn't flinch. He just twisted my arm tighter until I cried out in pain. Em was still screaming, hammering the door so hard, I thought it would break off its hinges. "Let me out," she cried. "Please, somebody open the door." "This isn't her," the tall man said calmly, still holding me down. And suddenly everything stopped. The banging, the screams, silence. Then came her voice again, soft, trembling, but wrong. "I am," she said gently. "I am the rooster. Please, open the door." The tall man released me at once and sprang to his feet in one fluid motion. He opened the door as if it had never been locked at all. And there she was. Em stood in the middle of the room. "We need to get the hell out of here," I snapped. "This is fucking insane." We were sitting in the kitchen now, Mike, Em, and me. "We can't," he muttered. "Greg, I'm sorry. We can't leave." I glared at him. "What do you mean, can't?" I growled. "Greg." Beside, his voice low and guilty. "That guy locks everything when it starts. There's no way out until he opens the doors again." I stared at Mike, furious. How could he drag us into this shit? Em was covered in scratches, and we still had no idea what was going on in that damned room. "Mike," I hissed, "you've been here before, haven't you?" He just nodded, and for a second, I honestly wanted to punch him in the face. "Guys," Em whispered, "please, just stop." She didn't look good. Her face and arms were covered in thin red marks, deep scratches. It looked like she'd done to herself, but I couldn't believe that. Something was wrong in that room. Em didn't remember anything that had happened while she was inside. She said that once the door closed, it felt like something had shut her mind off, like something knew that what happens in there can't be shared. It belongs only to the one inside. "So what now?" I muttered. "The ritual continues," he said quickly. He says the verse. Each person with figurine goes in, and when it's done, he opens the doors. "This is bullshit," I shot back. "Look at Em, Mike. Look what they did to her. What do you think they'll do to me?" "It's not that bad, Greg," Em said softly, brushing her hand across the scratches on her arm. "They don't hurt. Not really." "You'll be fine, Greg," Mike added. "Oh, shut the fuck up, Mike." I barked. "If you're so damn smart, then tell me what happens. What did they do to Em? What's going to happen to me?" "Greg," Em murmured. "Try and calm me down." "Greg," Mike interrupted. "It's always like this with a rooster." "What?" I snapped. "Every time I've been here," Mike said, "whoever got the rooster, they always came out a little shaken up. That guy says the rooster's wild, but at least it's free." "What kind of bullshit is that?" I muttered under my breath. "That's how it's always been," he said grimly. He recites the verse. People go in. The only one that changes is the man. That one's never the same. I was about to ask what the hell he meant. "What verse? What are you talking about?" When the tall man appeared in the kitchen doorway. "The man is next," he said coldly. "It's time." I was already standing inside the room. The small black figurine, shaped like a man, lay at my feet. It took everything in me to step inside, especially after seeing what had happened to the others. The strict-looking woman with the dog figurine had stayed behind in the living room. An older man sat beside her, rubbing her back, while she just stared blankly into the distance. The young boy who had drawn the bull was stretched out on the couch, his legs propped up. He must have fainted at some point. The tall man just stood there, cold and silent, waiting for me to go in. It was Em who finally convinced me. I didn't want her to see how scared I really was. I tried to make my irritation look like worry for her, but inside I was terrified. The room itself felt repulsive. As the door closed behind me, panic began to rise in my chest. I could still hear the tall man's final words. "The man stands and waits the shadow." Then the door shut completely. The little light bulb above me glowed harshly. I stood there frozen, just watching. But nothing happened. Not a sound. Not a movement. Is this all some kind of joke? I thought, but then I remembered Em's wounds. Something moved. The figurine's shadow began to stretch, longer and longer still. It crept across the floor, up the opposite wall. A large, dark blotch formed on the white paint. A black stain that began to shift and spread. A tear rolled down my cheek. I don't even know why. The dark shape started to take form, and slowly it became a man. He stood there in front of me, like my own shadow come alive. But the light hung directly above my head. It was impossible that it was mine. The figure reached out his hand. At first, I thought it was toward me, but then, on the right wall, a child's shadow appeared, a little girl running. Her movements were slow, as if the distance between them was endless. When she finally reached him, the two embraced. Then they both turned to face me. Neither had a face. Both were just black shapes, and yet I could feel their gaze on me. They knew I was there. Then, together, they raised their arms and pointed upward, at the ceiling, at the glowing light above me. I looked up slowly. The bulb buzzed softly in the silent room. The two figures were still there, but now they were motioning for me to come closer. I didn't move. I just stared back. Then the girl seemed to whisper something to the man, and with slow, mime-like motions, she began to run toward me. Her shadow moved without moving, as if she were sprinting in place. Suddenly, her shadow stretched, reaching across the floor toward me. I tried to step back, but it caught my hand. I felt something soft wrap around my fingers, a gentle squeeze, like the touch of a real child. The light flickered. It pulsed, dimmed, and buzzed as if it were about to die. I felt the girl pulling my hand. Somewhere, a voice cried out in anguish. Then, for an instant, everything went black. The door burst open. The tall man stood there, looking at me from the living room. There was something different in his face now. Almost joy. I stepped out. Everyone stared at me in shock, as if someone famous had just stepped out of a wardrobe, or maybe Jesus himself. Em rushed to me. She said something, but I couldn't make out the words. Her voice sounded muffled, as if coming from underwater. I looked into her eyes, tears blurring my vision, and I realized she wasn't the same person anymore. But then again, neither was I. Story 7. My friend asked me to follow him around while filming, but he wouldn't tell me why. Last week, my friend Jamie asked me to follow him around while filming him. Pretty bizarre request, right? I certainly thought so. I asked him what he wanted it for, and he told me some university project. So I guess the title of this post is a bit misleading. He did give me a reason. I just don't believe it, because I go to the same school as him. We both study finance. I know what his schedule is like, and there's no chance that one of his courses had him doing something like that. He then clarified that it wasn't for a course, but for a club he'd joined a few weeks ago. I asked him which club. He told me it was the filmmaking club. I'd never heard of that club before, and I'd never seen it advertised anywhere around campus, though I'd figured it did seem like the kind of thing that he might be into. He has a small YouTube channel where he goes around and films himself exploring creepy abandoned buildings. He says that it gives him the same kind of adrenaline he used to get from boxing before the concussion started piling up and he couldn't compete anymore. That was a good replacement. But even with the additional context, I just couldn't find it in myself to believe what he was telling me. It's not that I had any reason to want to doubt him. It was more so that he didn't seem all too convinced of it himself. You ever get that feeling? When somebody's trying to sell you on a story, but their tone's all weird and they're rushing and stumbling through their words. That's the vibe I was getting from him. But I just told myself that it wasn't a big deal. I'd just be a good friend and go along with it. He probably had his reasons for keeping the true purpose of it under wraps, and I wasn't the kind of guy to pry. So I told him I'd help him out. I then asked how long he wanted me to follow him around for. He told me an entire day, morning to night. At that point, I'd been under the assumption that he just needed me for a few hours. But an entire day? I had shit to do. But I guess he could sense my apprehension. So he offered to pay for drinks and the Uber the next time we were out, which I accepted. Realistically, I wasn't going to get anything done that day anyways. He told to wait outside of his dorm building the next morning around 10. He then handed me a small black device about the size of my thumb. Body camera, he'd explained, wear a jacket, and then clip it on near the center of your chest. Don't follow too close. He then gave me a brief rundown of his plans that day. He'd leave his dorm in the morning before walking all the way downtown, and then over to a public park on the other side of the city before going back downtown, and then back to the uni. I asked him if he was joking. He looked me dead in the eyes and told me he wasn't, that the project was a candid sort of thing, whatever the hell that meant. He then tacked on another strange request. He said that he wanted me to capture a 360 view of things. In other words, he didn't want me to be facing ahead the entire time. He wanted footage of all directions, all angles, but I didn't have to linger in any particular direction. Just a slow passing shot was all right. So basically, Jamie was asking me to strap on a body cam and trail him at a distance for 8 to 10 hours while intermittently twirling around in a circle. I can't say that it sounded like a particularly good time, but as a painfully broke student, the prospect of getting shit-faced for free was enticing enough. So I went ahead with it. That morning I woke up and walked over to his dorm. I waited around near the edge of the parking lot until I saw him come out the front entrance at around 10:05. Then I waited a bit longer before I started following him. I like to tell you that I noticed anything strange that day, but that just wouldn't be true, because nothing happened. It was just really boring, and by the end, I was freezing and my legs were cooked. Of course, I still did my best to do what he'd asked. Even if I felt a fucking weirdo, every time I'd stop in the middle of the sidewalk and slowly rotate around. At around 9 p.m., he'd simply headed back to his dorm, disappeared inside. Shortly after, I'd received a text from him telling me to send over footage whenever I had the chance, which I did once I was back in my room. He thanked me, told me to meet him at the nearby Iris pub after classes the next day. Of course, the entire thing had left me with more than a few questions, but I also wasn't really dying for any answers. I was too tired to really think about it, so I just went to bed. After classes that next day, I headed over to the pub. 5 o'clock, he'd told me. I waited until around 6. He never showed, wasn't answering his phone either. I thought it was a dick move, but figured he could make it up to me some other time. So I just let it go for the moment, headed back home. It's been 5 days since then, and I haven't seen or heard from him. His phone's radio silent. He hasn't posted on Instagram. He hasn't been coming to classes. He isn't in his dorm. Or if he is in there, he's doing his damn best to hide. I've gone and asked the people on his floor whether they'd seen him recently. They all told me that they haven't, that they're worried about him. It seems like the last time anybody's seen him at all was the morning after the day I'd filmed him. I've also heard through the grapevine that his floor's RA has contacted Jamie's parents, told him it might be a good idea to file a missing persons report because nobody has a fucking clue where he is or where he could be, which means that within the next few days, I'm gonna have to talk to some cops. I mean, surely, right? I spent an entire day with somebody right before they went missing. Hell, I'm probably being actively investigated as a suspect. Right now, there's a question that I can't stop asking myself. Was it coincidence that he went missing the day after I'd filmed him? I suppose it's possible, at least statistically speaking. But the circumstances just seem too bizarre for me to believe it. It's been gnawing at me in a way that I really don't like. A way that evokes this primal sense of dread. As if I've inadvertently become involved in something that I really don't want to be involved in. Better look for answers before I'm blindsided by an outcome I'm unprepared for. And I think combing through that footage might be a good place to start. Story 8. If you smell something sweet in the middle of the woods, turn back. There's a legend that if you're walking in the woods late at night and you smell something sweet, don't acknowledge it. Do not acknowledge any sudden sweet smell. And do not interact with any stranger you meet, regardless of what they say or do. If you do, you'll be kidnapped by the orang bunyan, a creature similar to the Fae in the West. They lure you into the world of the bunny, and once in, you will never be able to leave unless they allow you to, and by then, you will be a shell of your former self. My brother and I used to be naughty children. We never liked listening to our elders, and the same could be said about our friends. We ignored warnings and advice, running around the campung disturbing the other residents, who would curse at us and threaten a beating, though mostly half-jokingly. A few times we were caught by an uncle who was in a terrible mood, and we'd get flogged, but it still didn't deter us from doing the same thing again the next day. One day, while going down one of our usual paths, we found a new path on the side of the road, into a plot of rubber trees. This was a road we had taken multiple times before, so finding a new path all of a sudden excited us. The dirt path looked slightly used, and since we knew the owner of the plot of land and he was usually friendly with us, we decided to try exploring the area. Who knows, maybe we would find Harda Karen and become rich enough to leave the campung. We joked with each other. One friend, however, a skinny twig of a boy, decided he wanted none of it. Perhaps he had felt something strange about the place, or perhaps because it was almost maghrib time, but he decided to wait nearby while we went in. After a barrage of insults, calling him a coward, a wuss, and other unpleasant things, the four of us, including my brother and I, decided to go in at least for a bit before heading back from Maghrib. The first thing we noticed was that as we went deeper, the usual smell of rubber was becoming weaker. Having helped with harvesting rubber a few times, we had naturally grown used to the awful smell, so it was natural for us not to be too disgusted by it. But here, it almost seemed like it was being neutralized by something sweet. After what felt like just 10 minutes of walking, the smell of rubber seemed to have completely vanished, despite our surroundings still being composed of healthy rubber trees. Instead, a sweet rosy smell had taken its place. Do you guys smell this too? Yeah, it's weird. There's no smell of rubber here. Maybe Talk Ba did something to his trees? I heard he's super rich. Being young and dumb as we were, we did not think that there was anything wrong. We had ignored all the stories our parents and grandparents had told us so far. So the strange, sweet smell did not unnerve us, and instead, just made us curious on what Talk Ba, the owner of this plot of land, may have done to his rubber trees to make them smell better. So we continued walking, checking a tree every once in a while to see if maybe the smell was from there. A few minutes later, my brother suddenly stopped. There seems to be some people there. Maybe that's where the sweet smell is coming from. Looking to where my brother had pointed towards, we saw that there was a stream nearby, and on the opposite side were a few strangely dressed people eating. Did Talk Ba have a family? I thought he lived alone. One of my friends asked, maybe they're relatives? We might as well go say hi, answered my brother. As we approached the stream, the smell got stronger, confirming to us that it was coming from the picnic opposite the stream. Assalamu alaikum, shouted my brother to the group of people on the opposite side. Walaikum Muslim, come on over and join us. No need to be shy, replied one of them who was facing directly towards us. She looked about as old as my sister, who was in her 20s, with fair skin. Her face was pale and smooth, and her voice was soft and alluring. Yet, I could not really make out anything else from her face. There was something rather unnerving about it. Meanwhile, the rest of their group continued to eat as if we did not exist. Maybe we should go back. It's almost Maghrib. I whispered to my brother and our friends, come and eat Luckman. We have Pekasam and Supdaging. The fair lady continued calling to my brother, sweetly. Wait, we didn't introduce ourselves, did we? They probably know us from Mom or Talk. You guys go back if you want. And with that, my older brother started crossing the stream. Wait! I cried out, trying to stop him. Suddenly, the Maghrib Azan rang just as my brother crossed the stream, and then nothing. My brother and the group on the other side vanished, and so did the sweet rosy smell, replaced by rubber trees. I don't remember what happened after that, or how we got back out. Hadi, the friend that stayed out in the woods, told us we ran out of the woods suddenly, looking terrified and drenched in sweat. We didn't stop even when he called out to us, only stopping when the Kampung Ustaz stopped us, and we told him what had happened. For 30 days the whole Kampung searched for my brother, going deep into Talk Ba's Kaboom but found nothing. The path we went through also mysteriously disappeared, with no trace of it ever being there, and Talk Boss swore there was no stream anywhere in this kaboom. Did we imagine the trail, or had we been tricked by the bunny-in? I guess I'll never know. Story 9, The Dog Man. Warning, Gore, go to sleep right now, or a dog man will take you. My aunt said, trying to get me to sleep, what does dog man look like? I asked in my thin, 9-year-old voice. He is tall. Yes, very tall. His head is a dog's, his body is human. And, his ears are long. He can hear every sound. What does dog man do to kids? He takes them to the forest. He visits children who don't listen to their parents. He takes them away from their families and brings them to his forest. Will he take me too? If you behave, he won't take you anywhere. That was enough to scare me. I kissed my aunt and ran straight to my room, jumped into bed, and pulled the blanket over my head. Dog Man was a legend in our small village. Adults mostly used it to warn children. Sorry for changing the subject. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 5. So I lived with my aunt in a small village. You don't have to feel sorry for me. I had long gotten used to it. My aunt's house was at the very end of the village, and beyond it was a large forest. No one my age lived in the village. So I had 2 options for fun. Either listen to conversations of teenagers who sat in the village playground every night, or hang around in the forest behind our house. Because the forest was so big, I chose the first option and listened to the teenagers every night. I barely understood most of what they talked about. Usually politics, football, some recent event, or sexual stuff. Because of my age, they bullied me. But instead of sitting at home bored, I preferred being bullied by a few teenagers. One night, their topic was scary stories. One of them told some stupid, fake paranormal story his friend had experienced. Another talked about creepy noises he heard at night. These dumb stories were terrifying for a child like me. They must have noticed, because one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, Jack, are you scared? I don't want you wetting yourself and stinking up the place." To look brave, I said I wasn't scared. I wish I had told the truth. All right then, prove it. If you can prove you're braver than us, we can take you to a hunt or something like that. What do you say? Yes, definitely, I said excitedly. Then come with us. They took me to the forest at the end of the village. The howling sounds coming from inside terrified me. If you want to pass the challenge, you have to stay in this forest for 10 minutes, one of them said. His voice was serious, but the others were holding back their laughter. If you're scared, you don't have to do it. But if you don't, never ever come near us again. But I don't want to. Dog Man will take me. All right then, guys, if you don't want to watch a little brat whining, go back to the park. Everyone laughed, calling me a coward, and began to walk away. Wait! I yelled. Okay, I'll do it, I said reluctantly. They immediately came back. One of them took out his phone and set a timer for 10 minutes. They said if anything happened, they'd be right here and help me. Then they sent me into the forest. The forest was very dark, but the moonlight was enough for me. I walked for a few minutes. The only sounds were my footsteps and my breathing. Even though nothing happened, I was scared, terrified. I stopped and looked back. The teenagers were tiny dots in the distance. They couldn't see me, so I decided to stay where I was. After waiting a bit, I planned to return, even if it wasn't exactly 10 minutes. But my plan was ruined by a sound, a rustling sound coming from a little farther away. I tried to calm myself. It was probably just a hedgehog or something. When I looked toward the sound and saw nothing, I felt relieved. But then another sound made me freeze, a low growl. I immediately turned to where it came from. It was there, 25 or 30 meters away, a figure, a tall figure, with a head resembling a dog. I froze for a moment. What I was seeing didn't feel real. I think it hadn't seen me yet. It was focused on something far away, standing completely still. Then it suddenly lifted its head, as if sniffing something in the air. I couldn't breathe from fear. When I finally gasped for air, what happened next would give me nightmares for years. The creature slowly turned its head toward me, its mouth wide open. Its teeth were sharp like nails. It made a sound like a growl, and we stared at each other. Maybe it was only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. I ran screaming. I expected the teenagers to be waiting for me at the forest entrance, but the bastards had left me. I kept running all the way home. When I arrived, my aunt was in the garden, grumbling while dealing with something hanging from a tree. What happened? I asked, trying to hide my shaky breathing. Those assholes lit something like a firecracker and hung something on the tree. I'm dealing with that. Go to bed. I glanced at the tree. Hanging from one branch was a dog collar, long, silky red with white bone patterns. I ran straight to my bed. I couldn't sleep for a long time. Finally, I convinced myself that one of the teenagers dressed up as Dog Man to scare me. That was the only way I could sleep. When I woke up in the morning, something felt off. It was around noon. My aunt hadn't woken me up. Normally she woke me at sunrise. Maybe she woke up late too. I got out of bed, and that's when I smelled it. A faint smell like meat. One of my nostrils was blocked, so I couldn't smell it fully. I assumed my aunt cooked something like pastrami for breakfast. I washed my face and went to the kitchen, but it was empty. I searched the entire house, but she wasn't there. I ran outside. I wish I hadn't. What I saw made me break down crying. My aunt's body was hanging from a dog collar tied to the tree. One of her arms had been ripped off and was lying on the ground. The flesh of her leg was completely eaten. Only the bone remained. Parts of her body had bite marks. Some chunks of flesh were missing. Her abdomen was torn open, some of her organs on the ground, some hanging out. Her body was covered in dark red blood. My crying brought the neighbors. When they saw the scene, they called the police. I don't remember what happened afterward. The police kept the incident as a secret. After my aunt's death, I was placed in an orphanage. I stayed there until I was 20. Then, with the money I earned from a cashier job, I found a house on the other side of the country. I built a stable life, got married. My wife, Mary, gave birth to a daughter. I raised my child and enrolled her in school. Somehow, my mind managed to bury that memory. Now, let me tell you why I told you all this. Yesterday, my daughter asked what the thing hanging from the tree in our backyard was. I went to the backyard, and what I saw took me back 30 years. An old, silky, red dog collar with bone patterns. It's 2 a.m. now, and I'm writing this in front of the window, facing the backyard. This time I won't let it take my family. I have my gun next to me. The backyard is dark. I can't see anything. But in the silence of the night, I can hear something. A raspy, huffing breath. Story 10. I lost my arm in an accident, and lately I've been feeling it again. When I got into my accident, last year, I woke up in the hospital surrounded by my family. I was disoriented, eyes closed, listening to the sound of muffled sobs. I'd just come out of a terrible nightmare, filled with metal darkness and pressure. Hushed whispers and muffled comments filled my head. My mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. This isn't fair. He was just driving home. Fuck drunk drivers and fuck this. Is he gonna be okay? When should he wake up? It's been 15 minutes since, sir. Shouldn't someone be back by now? How long does it take to find the... Fuck what? Where was I? I tried to move, but my body was slow, sluggish. I heard a steady beeping, the saw from the machines. Could smell antiseptic. Then I heard something terrible. Through the sound of quiet sobs and steady breathing, someone said, "I can't believe they couldn't save his arm." My eyes flared open. the beeping starting to increase in pace. I struggled to focus against the light in the room, in the hospital room. No, 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 no. Please, God, no. My family ran over. Flurried sounds of movement and a barrage of concern. I ignored them all. I was paralyzed by fear. The seconds that passed felt like hours. I tried to lift my arms. I felt both of them then, heavy but numb. Relief crashed through me hard and swift, like a wave pouring cold liquid down my spine. I sighed, feeling the tension dissipate. Someone was holding onto my hand, gripping it tightly. I looked at my arms, ready to assess what the damage was. I could only see one under the sheet. I began to shake, my brain losing all functioning thought and reason. I turned my head to the right. Get the nurse, get the doctor, get someone. He's finally Awa dashed. My arm was missing. All that was, it was a tightly wrapped stump off of my shoulder. A sling compressed it further. It was gone. It wasn't a nightmare. I was awake. No one was holding my hand. The months after were hard. I met with countless doctors, went to physical therapy, talked to my family, had visits from my friends. People came and went like rotating ghosts. Everyone said the same things. You're so strong. I can only imagine what you're going through. I'm so sorry. Thank God it wasn't worse. Even with the bandages, the meds, the exercises, the reality of it didn't settle in the way people said it would. Everyone talked like adjustment was linear, like grief stepped aside neatly with time. But no one warned me about the quiet moments. When I'd wake up reaching for water with a hand that wasn't there. When I'd turn to scratch my shoulder and feel my muscles move, except they didn't. When my brain would swear I could feel the brush in my blanket, sliding against fingers I physically no longer had. But most often, the sensation that someone was gripping onto my missing hand tightly, to the point where it passed a level of comfort. It felt animalistic, too strong, almost painful. Phantom limb, my doctor called it. Common, normal, it'll lessen with therapy. But it wasn't just a sensation. It wasn't pins and needles or heat or the ache of something lost. It felt real, damn it. Most people try to skirt around the night. It all went wrong. None of them ever asked about the accident itself. There was an assumed belief that because I was hit head-on, there wasn't my side. But there was, I remembered it. They said I was unconscious when the paramedics found me, that I never woke up at the scene. Anything I remembered was my brain's feeble way of coping, putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. They're wrong. I remember everything. What really happened that night. Not in sharp frames like a movie, but in sensations. Hot, cold, pressure, weight. The smell of gasoline. The crunch of metal collapsing. The strange, ringing silence that happens right after impact. I remember my head hanging sideways, vision double blurred, blooming in and out like a dying camera lens. I remember trying to breathe, but feeling like my lungs were tied up with wire. And I remember my right arm, pinned, crushed, or at least that's what should have happened. Because when I reached for something, anything, to pull myself up, my hand didn't hit metal. It hit air, not normal air. Thick, hot, vibrating air. Like touching the space above a stovetop burner. And something in that air touched back, not lightly, unmistakable. It grabbed me, palm to palm, like it had been waiting. I should have died right then. The paramedics said so later, quietly, in the hallway when they thought I was asleep. He shouldn't have made it, they whispered. They were right, because in that moment, pressed between two worlds, I felt myself slipping, my body fading while something tugged on my arm from the other side. It wasn't a hand. Not really, but it shaped itself like one for me. It was curious, cold, hungry, and when it touched me, I felt everything it was made of, screams, heat, pressure, and a depth so endless it had a weight to it. A place where noise didn't echo because there was no space left for it to go. Hell isn't fire. It's being compressed until your thoughts can't expand. Millions of lost things piled on top of each other until everything feels like suffocation. I felt that through my arm, through that connection. And the last thing I remember before blacking out wasn't pain. It was the overwhelming certainty that something was leached from me in that moment. When I woke up in a hospital with my arm gone, wrapped neatly, sanitized, bandaged like a textbook medical case, that connection wasn't gone, because I could still feel my arm. Not phantom limb, not nerve misfires. Something else. Something still holding my hand. Nowadays, the majority of friends have stopped checking in. They think I've adjusted. It's been a year. I have my first prosthetic. A detachable piece of flesh-colored silicone, inflexible, cold, clumsy. My family still talks about survival like it's a blessing. Like crawling out a wreck you shouldn't have lived through is some divine miracle. But over the last year, I've realized something awful. I was never meant to survive that night. I didn't cheat death. I slipped out of something's grasp, and it wants its hold back. It's been changing. The squeezing has hit a peak. The pressure has heightened. The same crushing density I felt in the car. That way of a place too crowded for space to exist. And when the pressure touches me now, I remember the moment before I blacked out. How that thing groped my essence. It wasn't grabbing my arm. It was grabbing me. The arm was just the only part of me it could reach. Now I understand why the paramedics whispered I shouldn't have made it. Because I didn't escape a drunk driver. I escaped whatever is on the other side of that vibrating air. And it noticed. It's been trying to find me again, not through the world, but through the connection it made. The one stretched thin when they pulled me from the wreck and cut my arm away to free me. It's just been trying to finish pulling. Over the past month, the sensations have spread. The pressure crawled from the missing wrist to the shoulder into my ribs, from my ribs to my spine, like it's searching for the rest of what it touched, the rest of what it marked, the rest of me. And tonight, it found something. I think it found me. About an hour ago, the room went silent. Not quiet. Silent, like the air thickened into molasses, and trapped the sound inside it. My ears popped. My vision dimmed at the edges. My breath felt heavy and wet, impossible to breathe. It was the same feeling I had in the car. Except back then, only my arm was inside that place. Now the pressure is wrapping around my whole body, not squeezing, claiming, and I can feel it thinking. God help me. I can feel it recognizing me, like a hand patting pockets to find a missing item, and finally feeling the shape it's been searching for. My missing arm isn't what connects us. I am, and as I'm typing this, my vision is starting to double the same way it did that night, blooming in and out like a camera lens drowning in static. The air around me is vibrating, close, hot, too dense to breathe. It's not pulling my phantom hand anymore. It's pulling all of me, slow, steady, certain, like I'm the overdue half of a bargain I never agreed to. I wasn't supposed to wake up in that hospital bed. It was interrupted. And now that the thing from that place has found me again, now that the pressure is pushing through the walls, the floor, the air, now that it's curling around my spine like a new organ, it didn't take my arm. It left it as a marker, a claim, a reminder of what it didn't get to finish. My ears are ringing. My bones feel like they're hollowing out from the inside. My chest is tightening, not just from panic, but from something pressing inward, inward, inward. There's no light, just weight, just density, just inside-out gravity. It's here. It remembers me. And this time, nothing is going to pull me back.